In this lesson, we'll learn about some things to consider when choosing a photograph, as well as how we can bring that photograph into Illustrator so we can begin working from it. Alright, before we get started, I'd just like to let you know that Digital Tutors would like to say thank you to iStock Photo and the artist Alvarez for their images that were used in this series of lessons. You can access these same images and thousands of others by accessing your exclusive Digital Tutors iStock discount at the following site. Alright, so I'm working with the project file 02_begin right now. If you want to open that up and follow along, and this is just simply an empty document that I've created, and I believe the proportions here are, I think we've got 8 inches wide by about 13 inches tall, and the first thing I'm going to go ahead and need to do is bring in my image. Now, I'm going to, in order to do that, come up to File and choose Place. And I'm going to browse in my project files. We're going to look for this Photoshop file right here that has a number naming scheme. I'm going to grab that, and let's come over here and check this template box. And we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. I'm going to place that into my document here. And there we go. It comes in. We'll just center that up here in just a moment. Now, when working from a photograph here inside Illustrator, there's some things first you need to consider. Now, first of all, you may be wondering, where in the world do I get images to work from? And, I would just say that it really depends on what type of illustration you're wanting to create here. Now, in a perfect world, we'd be able to take our own photographs and work ideally from those photographs. Why? Because they belong to us, and there's no copyright things to worry about. Now, not all of us are photographers, so we don't all have that luxury. So there's a numerous amount of stock photography sites and resources out there that offer photographs to you. And the photograph you see in front of us here is actually from iStock Photo. Now, there's a whole new realm of things to consider when using stock photography, and some of this is really important. So the first thing you need to understand is this stock available, or can I use this for commercial purposes? Now, a lot of times stock photography is available for personal use, but if it's for a commercial project, then it's off limits according to the supplier of the stock. Now, another thing you need to consider is, do I need to notify either the artist that took the photograph or the company that's hosting the photograph that I'm planning on using it for a piece? Also, does the supplier of this image have any kind of rules or regulations when it comes to limiting how we can manipulate the image? Can we make derivative works of the image, pieces of artwork that are based on the original photograph? Are there any limitations when it comes to displaying the work that's created from the photograph? And how do we attribute the artist that originally took the photograph? Do we need to give them credit, like you heard at the beginning of this lesson? So you may want to check with the stock provider again to see if there's any specific rules or regulations that pertain to that stock photography you're thinking about using, especially if it's for commercial purposes. So if my advice to you would be is, if there is ever any doubt or you have any question, always ask. You can get into a lot of trouble when it comes to copyright laws and regulations on stock images. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive in here, and let's talk about why are we using this photograph. Well, whether it is a specific outcome you're wanting to reach in the piece of artwork that you're creating, or maybe you just see a photograph that inspires you. We're going to use this photograph and build on the level of realism in this photograph to create our artwork. Now, by working from this photograph, we're not going to necessarily have to be able to render out a portrait of a person without using any kind of assistance, just by hand. We're going to be able to lean on this photograph and the shapes and the forms of the photograph to create a basis for our artwork. Now, this particular photograph is a little bit grayed out right now, and that's because we made it a template layer. And I tell you what, I'd actually like to center the artwork up here in our file. So let me come over to my layers panel at this point, and notice that Illustrator has created for us this template layer. And you can see here that it by default is locked. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock that layer just by clicking on the little padlock, and we'll move that artwork over, centering it on our artboard here. All right, great. Now, the reason why this is dimmed out and it's kind of faint is because if we double click on that layer, we're going to notice here that a template layer gets dimmed to 50% its an original intensity. So if we uncheck template and hit OK, you can see here that photograph is much more vivid. Now, if we ever want to change this back to a template layer, all we need to do is come in and double click on that layer again here and just simply check that template box and hit OK. And again, we've made that into a template layer. Now notice here that, again, we've locked the layer. We can't select the artwork accidentally and move it around. And it's also, again, been dimmed out to 50%. So whenever I'm working from a photograph like this, I like to bring it in as a template layer. And if I need another version of this photograph open somewhere where it is not dimmed 50% just so I can see details, then maybe I'll keep that open in Photoshop or something in another window. But for working on top of, the template in Illustrator works great. Now, I have selected this image for a couple of reasons. And I think these are really important things to keep in mind when you're choosing your image. And the first thing here is the resolution. And you may notice this here, but this is a very high resolution image, so we have a lot of detail that we can actually zoom in really tight on here and capture. So we have a lot of detailed information being presented to us. So depending on the stylistic direction of your piece of art, whichever direction you're wanting to take this, you may need that detail, you may not. So I've gone ahead and chosen a very high resolution image so you can pull that out of your project files and you can go whatever direction you want to. Now, the second thing here is the lighting in the image. This is a professionally shot photograph, so you can see that the lighting is really nice. We've got a really nice level of lighting here, giving us really bright highlights as well as really deep shadows. And we've got our subject's face is really nicely illuminated, and nothing that is of great importance is completely hidden in shadow. This is all going to be very important as we begin translating this young woman into a vector illustration. So, in saying that, we're actually ready to go ahead and begin doing just that. So, in the next lesson, let's pick up where we leave off here, and we'll begin looking at some of the basic tools that I would use to create this young woman here in Illustrator.